Welcome to Top of the Line. This is the podcast version of our YouTube show. New episodes every Monday and Friday where we talk about audio and hi-fi related themes.
If you have any requests for a future episode, send us an email, totl@abyssheadphones.com.
So, with a lot of products in hi-fi, yearly updates seem to be the norm. It seems to almost be commonplace to have a schedule where you would release iterations and updates of your product on a more or less reliable, predictable schedule. And this is pretty common, of course, in tech industry. We expect a new phone every year, so why not with headphones?
What's
the upsides and downsides of that?
Used to see that a lot with when CES was, during CES, like what comes every January, right? Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas. And companies would actually target their new product releases for that show because it got a lot of press, media. Everyone was there. All press is there. So it's a great place to intro something new. And they were almost guaranteed to have, free press. So why not? So that in the consumer electronics space, that tends to be the biggest time, although it could happen any time of the year. Apple doesn't target that. I don't think. They just kind of do their thing usually in the fall.
They used to target whenever they did one of their events, but that kind of slipped now because I guess it's just difficult to do that.
Yeah.
But that is a reasonable enough reason, right? It gives everyone a target, a set point when you normally don't have one. Because normally there's really no intrinsic reason why you need to release on a certain schedule.
Right.
And sometimes it's easy enough to do that you figure, well, we'll come up with an update in a year, and by then maybe someone's looking for an update. In certain industries that makes sense. People want to buy a new, better thing. But in hi-fi, it's a little trickier. People don't necessarily want a new headphone every 6 months.
I think with the CES example, they also like to gauge interest, because then they know like sometime later in this year they could come out with it or not, depending on how much people liked it, like when they showed it off like a potential new product.
Yeah, right.
So that's a different kind of thing.
Yeah, there's a number of things that were CES that never went to production.
Right. They're like, we might make this.
Probably because no one, or were modified afterward to,
right.
For features or different features. Where it's one thing about CES. It's nice when you're talking to thousands of people. You get some ideas. You get some feedback instantly,
right,
where you don't have to go into full production yet, and you could say, I'm 3 months out, and you could modify it.
I think that's how most people use shows like CES, a big show. It's really just to get feedback from the public because there's only so much you could do. Even if you're a big company, it's hard to really gauge public interest with high certainty. To make sure that when you come up with this product, it's going to knock it out of the park. It's tough. So I think companies use things like that to say, hey, look what we have. And they don't really say when they're releasing it or a price a lot of times because they don't really know.
They usually want to
see what people are saying, right? They want to see, well, do people like this? How much are they willing to pay? How much should we charge? When should we release it? They're just trying to gauge what people are looking for at that time, whether or not that's something they're interested in.
Well, everyone kind of does the same thing at the headphone space too. You go to the manufacturers do can jams, and a lot of times they're showing product that isn't available yet, or it's a prototype, quote unquote, and they want to gauge response, but. The problem we found out with doing that ourselves is that you tell people it's a prototype, and for whatever reason, it's not printed like that. People go like, "Oh, look at this thing sucks," or "that sucks," and it's like
98% of people think it's a done product. And they're going to buy it just like that.
Part of it's a prototype, didn't you get? Maybe the word prototype isn't strong enough. Maybe there's an issue with that. Maybe it's misunderstood what that means. It's not done yet. Like when we did Diana for the first time, we probably showed her for 2 years or more before we actually sold the Diana. And we were playing around with the design. We were working on it ourselves. We were trying to figure out how to make the world's thinnest planar freaking boutique headphone. Took time.
Yeah, I think it's more of a less rigid schedule, I think, in audio. Like stuff gets updated kind of often, but everybody's kind of like gauging where to go next, and then kind of saying, well, at some point we might make this.
Kind of ebbs and flows around.
Right.
We're all flowing around each other in some ways, like, what is the competition doing and how expensive are they type thing. And it's not, I doubt it's nothing like big business, Of course, there's some companies that don't care about the competition. They're going to do what they're going to do. I think Apple's one of them. I don't really think they consider, they set the price point where they need to be, and they're an outlier. I mean, they're kind of like a high-end company that happens to be mass market. It's a very different, they're amazing. It's amazing how they could get away with that, to be honest with you, because you don't really see that anywhere too often in any other big business.
Apple's one of the few that could get away with it.
But in our end of the thing, us little guys, us boutique manufacturers, we have to watch ourselves. We can't spend billions of dollars to design something and say, yeah, you know what, we changed our mind.
It would be nice.
Doesn't work like that. Yeah, would be nice. Yeah, really. Can you imagine having a limited budget? It'd be like, well, let's see. Well, you know what? We'll try toast and jelly and see if that sounds good.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
Unlimited
Wait,
budget.
we'll make a special process where we take white toast and we put it in a press and you layer it on each other, and then you put a certain resin in there, and it turns the starch into a whole different material that never existed before.
Okay.
And it just happens to sound good. Oh wait, that's cellulose drivers, right?
I think that's the key thing though, is that you know, you just don't have the time or the budget to just pump out new product all the time, you know.
Yeah.
At this scale, you know.
You're kind of busy working.
Yeah.
Well, and there's a few sides to that, because what's the advantage, right? To the consumer, does it really matter that there's this trivial small update?
Probably not.
I think there's a bit of a balance because, yeah, you almost always could come out with some minor update that improves the product in some kind of meaningless way, but a lot of times the people that already own the product get upset because now they feel their product's out of date, right? And so there's kind of a trade-off with coming out with a new product. Maybe you want to ship something that's slightly better, but sometimes it kind of makes sense if it's just a trivial update to just wait a little while so that there's a reasonable amount of time between transitions, and plenty of companies seem to do that as well. They kind of like stock up upgrades and then they release it in one big revision rather than doing continuous iterations. But some companies continually iterate. Really depends on, I guess, the way they design, the way they do things, the way it works for them. And sometimes there's production issues. You can no longer get this part. You can't make it this way anymore. Supplier changed something.
Yeah, that's happening more often than not lately. You know, where people have to change up suppliers, so they got to adapt to what's available in to us from materials and such versus, you know, what you're used to accommodating with. It kind of sucks for small companies too, like that, because a lot of them can't adapt to that. You know, if you're not making your own products like we are in house, where we're doing it, where we can just on the fly, you could write new code, change the machining, and, you know, change it. Let's say we can't get a certain jack or something, right? And now we got to change the way it fits. That hasn't happened yet, but I'm just saying, if it happened where you couldn't get a part, now you got to adapt your whole design around a new part. And we're probably talking changes of 20, 30 thousandths of an inch here and there, right? But the point is, you got to change it. So now the machine's got to be programmed. You know, you're making new parts, different parts than you were at before, and that's time consuming. And you got to track all that. And sometimes you change one part, now other parts around it have to change too. So it's difficult for small companies to do that. So you tend to see not a lot of change really, because at least for that reason, if not others, it's expensive to change. It's expensive.
Well, especially as the product gets more complicated. When you're talking about specific chips you're using, you know, and you can't get it anymore.
You got to redesign a whole board.
Yeah, you have to do the whole thing.
That's why the car industry's screwed right now, because they're not adapting to what's available. I don't know if they can.
And a lot of times you could have stuff that's in process. You could have stuff that's 3/4 of the way done. It's waiting on this one process, this one part. And if you can't get that part anymore, what do you do with what you have already done? What do you do with all the parts that are no longer useful? Now it's a very expensive cost.
Everything you have and start over, basically.
Right.
Just
that happens,
because of
unfortunately, too much.
Yeah.
And that's the reality of manufacturing. And so I guess that kind of leads into silent upgrades. You hear people talk about these things. Oh, why did you change this? And that's very difficult, because there could be hundreds of reasons why something changes. It could be a manufacturing issue. It could be this part's no longer available. And because of that, there's a trickle down.
Or there could be a subtle improvement too. Could be cost. It could be all kinds of
could be a problem, right? Could be something was breaking more than you expected. Hey, we better change this. We should fix it. There could be a ton of reasons. Could be supply issues.
Usually changes are done on at least in the high end, they're usually done for a positive aspect. And I don't see people making negative changes in our industry. It tends not to happen.
Usually it's very uncommon.
It's a better aesthetic, maybe round the edges a little more, you know, better finishes. Usually the changes are improving upon whatever subset of whatever you call it, things you were going through to build this product. You know, somewhere along the way, something got easier. You found another way to do it that's a little better, and it also just happens to improve something, whether it be the looks or the sound or, you know, or even just the longevity of the product. You know, it could be something simple like, hey, I found a better, using the same jack analogy, I found a better jack. This company's making a better jack than what we were using. Let's change to it. And it makes sense all around if you were having trouble with the original jack, you know. And so then you go through the travel and the process of developing or changing the product around that new part.
Yeah, I guess you don't usually want to change things just to change things, just for fun, because it's more work to change things.
Yeah, the status quo is easy.
Yeah,
is the easiest thing. Just keep doing what
you're
you're
usually
doing.
doing it for a reason.
Yeah.
And so that's why a lot of times you see really small companies don't change things.
No.
It's just too expensive for them to do so. But it's a double-edged sword, because sometimes change is for the better. Sometimes change makes your product easier to assemble. And easier to assemble is better for everyone. It tends to mean higher quality. It tends to mean lower risk of issues.
Yeah.
Things that are very, very complicated are just intrinsically difficult. And that's no bueno for anyone.
Well, and for the consumer side, I think that's what you want. You want manufacturers to do these subtle changes that improve upon the product. You know, I mean, I guess the way to look at it one way is that, okay, well, let's say you bought it's the same product for years, and you're one of the earlier adopters. Well, you don't have all those changes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So compared to what the latest thing, brand new, would have. But, you know, and there's no way to tell how many changes were involved or if there were any at all. Could be the same damn thing. But I understand from the consumer side where, you know, so you always want the latest and greatest. But, you know, from the manufacturer side, they're usually adapting to, like we talked about, their environments, whatever it might be. You know, whether it be an issue with a product where it's breaking a lot and you need to change something to make it better, or the manufacturer that you buy the parts from suddenly started making shitty parts. You know, I mean, you were going along just fine, and all of a sudden, what the hell's going on here, right?
Yeah.
And it's not your fault. You just run into this brick wall.
That happens sometimes as well,
You know?
which I guess the consumer will be unaware of. But sometimes you order a part, same part number, same supplier, made in the same country, it's different.
Yeah.
It's made in a different way. Some coating that used to be there is no longer existent. The material's different. It's a different thickness of something. Something changed in a way that the part isn't as robust.
Because they probably ran into an issue with a supplier themselves.
Inevitably, that's what it is.
They had to make a change too.
A trickle down.
It's a trickle down, yeah, which trickles up.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like now, like I said, with the auto industry, what do they run into? They can't get chips for the computers.
Same thing. There's so many
and they're
industries
tied
that are
to these
screwed like that.
computers.
Right.
They're not going to redesign the computer for every friggin' car. You know, they're going to wait it out. You know?
Right. That's one of the few industries where if you're missing a part like that, it's just so difficult and expensive to make a trivial little update to fix it. So people really don't. And now as a result, a lot of companies just aren't shipping because they can't.
Yeah.
So that's trouble. That's why usually most people do updates. It's a problem solver, right? It almost
Usually.
always makes the product better.
Yeah.
You hope.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, we're all doing that. And we're all trying to make better products, and it's a good thing. So, you know, I mean, you don't want the status quo to be shit. Not that anyone's making that, but I'm just saying, if you have a problem, you would hope, if there's a problem with a product, you would hope that they would solve it. You wouldn't hope that they would just let it go and just say, you know, it only affects so many people.
Shockingly enough, though, it's pretty common in some industries for companies to keep shitting. Jesus. Shockingly enough, it's pretty common in a lot of industries for companies to keep shipping product that they know has a flaw. They know has a fault that's going to limit its service life.
Right.
And for whatever reason, they choose to not do anything about it because I guess it's just easier. Now, we happen to be in high-end industry where that's really not acceptable. And usually we don't have enough of a supply chain issue to worry about throwing out thousands of products or some huge amount of money. So usually we can make changes pretty rapidly compared to some industries, but some industries it's so expensive. You have automation in place and you need to deal with the exact thing. Otherwise it could be millions, tens of millions of dollars to make a minor change.
And our end, on the higher end too, I mean, QC is very important. I think we have to QC every goddamn part we put in a headphone. I mean, we obviously QC our own stuff. Yeah. We build the drivers, so we're looking at it while we're building it. We could see flaws. They're not made if they're flawed, right? They're just the material, something wrong with the material. Everything's inspected. You think about what we go through. Every part's inspected before anything's assembled anywhere. Well, you know, right from the diaphragm materials to the tension rings, the precision machining of that, and they all have to be inspected. And you've got on the machining side, he's looking for what tolerances on some of this stuff. He's got. He's measuring parts right off the machine on a continuous basis.
Some of our parts on, like Diana, for example, where we have a critical interface, they have a total deviation of 2/10,000ths of an inch. So that's plus or minus 1/10,000, 0.0001 inch.
Yeah.
And that means
that's
things
not
things need to fit just right in some cases, and there's just no way around it.
So the part comes off the machine or whatever you're doing, say you're doing a dozen at a time or 6 or 8 pieces. He's measuring every one of them because it's critical. And the ones that don't meet that spec, recycle, tossed.
Right.
So yeah, I mean that's it's expensive when you get to that point.
Well, not only that, even if they make it through all the way, you measured them and everything, and they make it to assembly, and then something doesn't fit right, paint or something too thick or something, you can go back there, talk to them about it, see what if there's any issues, and you can sort them like immediately as soon as like the first part has.
Well, that's
a
the
problem.
beauty of making everything in house is you can
Yeah.
change things on the fly to adapt to something was unperceived that wasn't you didn't think was an issue or wasn't an issue before. Like we said, material changes, something changes. A bit on a CNC wears out and the parts are out of tolerance. All of a sudden, didn't realize you got to change the tool.
Yeah, we're not
on the
like
machine.
stacking up hundreds or thousands of parts.
A lot of mistakes
Yeah,
until
yeah.
somebody
And then it's like,
finally
oh.
figures it out, and you're throwing out
Yeah.
100,000 pieces.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's kind of one of the reasons we have to be so tight on this. But but that's also the same reason why it's difficult for us to make a change, because if we have hundreds of these parts in stock that are ready to assemble, and you decide to make a change, you're throwing out hundreds of sets of parts that could have been product.
Right.
I mean, you literally got to get rid of it if it no longer works or fits. So it's difficult to make changes without really being a costly thing. So we tend not to.
Well, if there's no need for it, why bother?
Yeah.
I think what happens in a lot of industries is maybe if you don't have any parts left, you need to reorder more soon, and you do this very infrequently. Maybe then you feel, well, it's been a year and a half since we ordered these parts before. We could make a change. We could change something up. I think it kind of almost gives you a small bit of encouragement to change something when you don't have to deal with making it, and you order very infrequently.
Yeah.
But it's kind of different from like a manufacturer perspective if you actually make the part, because we can make any change pretty much for any reason at any time. But we set ourselves up to do that because of supplier issues.
Yeah, well, one thing I could think of just as an example, because we talk about change, but we're not relating it to the headphone, is I remember, I don't know how many years ago, I think it was when we started the TC model, the 1266. Weren't we originally the steel baffles for the face baffles for the speaker, the drivers? They were originally water jet cut,
Yes.
right? Yeah. So with the TC, we started machining the part. So you decided, well, since we're machining it on a CNC versus getting cut with a water jet, let's throw we always wanted a chamfer on all the oval cuts to kind of flare out, the sound note to avoid edge diffraction from the
Right.
sound. And you couldn't do that with a water jet. It's cut straight.
It's cost prohibitive.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. It was just not a good idea with a water jet. Anyway, bottom line is we implemented that into part of the drivers into the TC, and and I mean, who would notice that, right? But when you look at it on a macro shot, like somebody shoots it, like you see, like Joshua Valor's, where he comes in and he zooms in on a 1266 diaphragm,
Yeah.
and it's just chamfer as obvious as hell. It's like, what you look like that looks like you're, I don't know what it looks like close up. It looks like you're in a different world, and but that's the finer changes or details that we can implement over time that may or may not be perceivable, but we know that.
Yeah, I noticed
it couldn't
like first
hurt.
thing, but I've never heard anybody even mention it that it's.
I don't think
different.
anyone's caught it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it is.
Well, yeah, you have to know what it was
Yeah,
before.
that's the thing.
Right.
You'd have
Yeah.
to, or have one side by side with an old one.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's doing macro shots of the older models, so
Not that I know.
they ain't around there.
Yeah.
So yeah, but anyway, it's things like that where we're always making these subtle tweaks that usually are integrated into the new model set, and we're at a point now where like the TC and and other manufacturers are the same way. Look how long some of these manufacturers have had a high-end headphone out, where they stuck with the same model.
Yeah.
The 800, the 800S, the Susvara, 1266. You reach a point where these headphones are so good that why do you want to change it?
Well, and it's hard to make a meaningful.
Well, that too.
improvement.
Yeah, right. You're hitting an upper limit of the material science at some point. It's not to say we couldn't make it better,
Right.
but to what end? And then where are you going with that?
A lot of times when a product like that comes out, a really high-end product, it's kind of more of like a statement piece. If it's the flagship, usually you put a lot of care into it out of the gate, so you reduce the likelihood for the need to change. With lower-end products, that isn't really always the case. You're changing to appeal to the market more. You're changing to maybe try to boost demand for your product because you just don't think it's where it needs to be. But in the high end, you don't quite see that as much. It's more or less, if you make a change, it's kind of subtle. It's to improve manufacturability, solve a problem, make the product better overall.
Right.
You know, you think about it like you talk about cheese, for example. I mean, how often do they change cheese anyway?
New
You got-
cheeses?
Yeah, we just had, we bought it a while ago, and it's been in the fridge, and I'm like, finally, we're busting it open. We bought this 15-year aged cheddar,
Oh.
right? Which, I mean, nothing's ridiculous in cheese. It only gets so expensive. But it's
Well,
15 years this cheese sat somewhere. I don't know, cave. I don't know where they put this stuff, right? Until you could eat it. It's kind of like scotch and stuff like that, which blows my mind. And it's got this bit of a edge to it. You know what I mean? It's different. It's almost like it's got particulate in it. It's been sitting so long.
I hope it doesn't have particulate.
Well, I don't know what it is, but it has a rough texture to it, which is, so anyway, that's, I guess that's one of the things where the thing is after 15 years, it takes you 15 years to figure out if you should make a change. Now that's brutal.
Yeah, that's
You don't know how it's
That's
going
a
to
problem,
taste
yeah.
until 15 years later.
Yeah, I guess that could, like 50 years scotch.
You could really
yeah.
be screwed, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what are you going to
Well,
do? I mean, you're going to throw it all
50
out.
years later?
Yeah.
Oh, that was a waste of
Yeah,
50 years.
that would really suck. So, it's kind of funny when you think about it, but sometimes you're better off not waiting too long either. But anyway, enough of this upgrade path thing.
Mhm.
I mean, we're fortunate to have really good products now, and we're busy just making them. Yeah. So we'll just carry on and do what we do, and when something new comes along that we could finalize, like the close back we've been talking about forever, then that's next. So anyway, on that note, thank you everybody for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to us, because that way you'll know what's coming up next. And thumbs us up. Take care.